very smart. He was clever. He thought of a lot of things. And then Jesus asked them a question. Okay, don't move that table. It moves this paper, this tape then, okay? So don't move that. So now listen. Jesus asks them a question. He says, the baptism of John, was it from God or was it from man? You know what that means when he says that? Was it a godly thing or was it just a man-made thing or something man did? He asked them a very interesting question. And now all of a sudden the scribes and the Pharisees, they're thinking, how do we answer this? They reasoned and talked to each other. And they said, if we shall say it's from heaven, if we say that, then he's going to say, why didn't you listen to John then? If it's from heaven, then you should listen to him. So they're like, oh, no, we can't say that. Okay, what if we say from man? Well, then the people are going to be angry at us because they like John the Baptist. They think he's a prophet. What are we going to say? So Jesus had them cornered because he knew that they were trying to corner him. And then they answered, Jesus said, well, we cannot tell you. And Jesus says, well, then I can't tell you by what authority I do this. See, they wanted to trap Jesus. They wanted to corner him and finally catch him because of his words. And he said, no, you're going to be caught. You don't know what to do with it. And then he asked them about John the Baptist. You know what the best thing is to do to not get cornered? Just always say the truth. Then you don't have to get cornered. Just be truthful. Then you don't have to be cornered when people ask you a question. Well, this is what it is. Sometimes it doesn't feel good, but it doesn't mean you're cornered because you tell them the truth. You can freely say it. You don't have to feel bad for what you said. You don't have to think, oh, well, if I say this or if I say that, then I'm going to be in trouble. Well, if it's truth, it's still the best. If you get in trouble for the truth, you still have a clean conscience. You still can walk free away from that, right? So always remember, forgive others, do good things to bear good fruit, and tell the truth, right? And that'll help you in your life, all right? You may go back to your seats.
Still is. So there's plenty of room. More people could come. I don't know if that needs to be shifted around or not, but anyway, it feels good to see a room fairly full here. I like it. It's nice to see all the faces and to be before you again. I want to talk to you a little bit today about Satan. We, I think, neglect to give him some credit sometimes. We don't think about him very often. Everything in this world seems to have a natural reason for it. At least that's what our society wants to teach us nowadays, is that this and this and this happened. Oh, that's because of this law and that law and the other thing. And they try to prove everything, that everything would have a natural reason why it happened the way that it did. And then because of that line of reasoning, we sometimes fall into the trap of not recognizing Satan for who he is. So though he's invisible, though we cannot see him, he's very, very active in a realm that is right before our eyes, or perhaps deeper than that. He can speak into our mind. He can sometimes give us thoughts. He's very active and very evident in our lives very often. So I'm hoping that with today's little teaching here, perhaps you won't learn anything new, but a reminder that he is very active, and maybe you'll be able to see him a little bit better than the way you've been seeing him till now. You know, the Bible calls Satan, a king. He has a kingdom. He has a rule. He is actually called the God of this world. He has powers that you and I are often falling prey to. And we give him credit, we give him advantage in our lives many times without recognizing it. And we let him in ways that perhaps you haven't thought about. And I'm going to go over a few of those ways today. But there's a passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. It says, "Lest Satan should get an advantage of us." That's us, Christians. "For we are not ignorant of his devices." And I'll get into that passage a little bit better for the context of it. But the devil has devices. And now when we think of devices nowadays, we think of these things. They're devices. But if you think of the word device more in terms of a formed design. So somebody formed the design of this, then they built the actual device. But the devil has formed designs or invented schemes and plans to ruin your life. He has artificial contrivance or a stratagem. He has strategies on ways to destroy you, on ways to get advantage of you. And he's actively searching out opportunities to take advantage of you, to take advantage of your family, to take advantage of the church, to take advantage of the culture and the society that we live in. He's very, very active. And he's not dumb. Sometimes we get this mindset, greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. I don't need to be afraid of anything. We shouldn't be afraid of the devil because he's been defeated. But make no mistake, he's very, very deceptive. And he can get an advantage of you and thereby deceive you. And if you're ignorant of his devices, you might be taken advantage of more often than others. So we would owe it to ourselves and to the people around us to not be ignorant of his devices. He actually says here that we are not ignorant of the devil's devices. So what is his formed design? What is his strategy? What is his method in which he tries to get advantage of us? And I know there's a lot more to it than what I'm seeing, but the more I thought about this concept, the more I saw it everywhere. And maybe that's just how it goes. Sometimes you get a certain thought in your mind and then you start seeing it everywhere. Almost like when you buy a new car, all of a sudden you see that everybody has it. And it's annoying almost, right? Like, oh, there it is, and there it is, and there it is. But with this case, where I thought of this idea, this concept, it's not a new concept, but the idea of divide and conquer. It's a war strategy, divide and conquer. You start to think about that in many different areas and different avenues of life, and you realize that the devil uses this tactic everywhere. And it's a good strategy. It's not only an evil one, it works in good ways as well. But we're going to get into some of that. So before we get into that, let's pray, and we'll talk about a few different examples and then some scriptures in reference to it. Father, we're grateful to you this morning for the church that gathers at Springfield and the church that's gathered with us in spirit across this area through the internet. We thank you, God, that we can gather together in your name. And we know that where 2 or 3 are gathered together in your name, you are there in the midst of us. And we know that there's power and that there's great strength in unity. and in like-mindedness in this regard. And we thank you that you're with us. Lord, we pray you bless our morning, bless our service, bless the words as we share, and bless the hearers as they hear. God, we thank you again for Jesus and for this gathering in his name. Amen. In Numbers chapter 22, 24, 25, 31, it gives us the story of Balaam. Most of you children know the story of Balaam because it's the time when the donkey talks. Balaam's ass spoke to him, and that's what the story seems to be about. But there's a lot of references in the New Testament back to Balaam and the dangers of what Balaam did. See, Balaam was a prophet before Israel was a strong nation. They were just coming out of Egypt, and God was just developing the nation of Israel. But God had prophets outside of the nation of Israel. And, it would almost seem that Balaam must have been a false prophet or speaking to a strange God, but he wasn't. He heard directly from the Lord, and it says it on several occasions. I won't read the story here today. But the king of Moab, Balak, comes to Balaam, and he says, I saw what Israel did to the previous nation that they just came across, and I don't want that to happen. And now I've heard that you have access to this Lord, to this Jehovah, this God. And I've heard that you're a prophet, that you can put blessings and curses on people. Now we'd like to pay you to come and put a curse on this people Israel before they come and destroy us. And Balaam, being a faithful prophet, he goes to God and says, God, can I go with these people? Am I allowed to do that? I think you get the inkling almost right away that Balaam was interested in the money that he was going to receive. He was kind of like, ooh, I would like to do that. That sounds good. And when a king of a great country is asking you to come do him a favor, you want to do it. But at the same time, he's like, no, I better go talk to God. I'm not going to do anything without God's approval. So he goes to God. God says, no, these are a blessed people. They're my people. I won't curse them. So Balaam goes back to the men that came to him and says, sorry, I can't curse them. Not going to happen. Balak sends the men again sometime later with even more money, even more promises. And he kind of sweetens the pot. Eventually, Balaam gets a half okay from God. He gets the half okay to just go. He says, but don't say anything that I don't tell you to say. And Balaam's okay with that. That's fine. As long as I get to go, maybe there's a way for me to earn some money in this deal. But when he goes there, finally, the whole story, he's on his way. He left without God getting God's full approval. And that angel with the flaming sword shows up. And that's when Balaam's donkey stops several times and kind of squeezes his leg against a wall. And Balaam gets off and beats his donkey. And then the donkey actually speaks to him. God opens Balaam's eyes and he sees the angel standing there with the sword drawn, ready to thrust him through. And Balaam realized that he could have died. And then he goes to Balak, the king of Moab, very soberly, very humbly. And he recognizes, I better do what Jehovah says. I better obey him 100%. And so the story goes, he goes up on a high hill, he overlooks the nation of Israel, and he offers several sacrifices, and Balak says, okay, now curse him. And Balaam opens his mouth, and nothing but blessing is coming out. He just speaks all good things about Israel. He wishes them God's blessing. He tells them that they're going to be blessed and that they're going to be strong and a great nation and so on and so forth. And Balak is furious, obviously. And so he leads them to a different vantage point, and they look at him from a different perspective. And Balak says, now curse him. And Balaam says, I can only say what God tells me. And so Balaam opens his mouth, and again, just blessings come out. And Balak is furious. But Balaam, because he loved money, and he knew he couldn't defy God, he had a different plan. He says to Balak, I have an idea. I can't curse these people, but I have a way in which you can still defeat them. What you should do is send your women in among them. They've been told to stay away from strange women and from strange gods, but if you can get them through the sexual appetites of the men, send all your most beautiful women, all the most indecently dressed ones, send them into their camps and take advantage of them, then they will not only give you their bodies and their lives, they not only will break God's commands, but they will actually worship the gods that these women worship. And so what is Satan doing, or what is Balaam doing in this reference? He's trying to divide the people and then conquer them. He's trying to come in a sneaky way in which he can split the people up, split them away from their God, split them away from the blessings of God so that they, in a sense, curse themselves. So that he can come in sneakily, subtly, as the devil always seems to do. He's very subtle. He can sneak in subtly and trick the people into bringing the curses of God upon themselves rather than Balaam being guilty of it. So Balaam thought he would be off the hook, plus he gets a big chunk of money from Balak, the king of Moab, and everything goes well. But obviously it didn't go well for Balaam. He was killed for the whole scenario, and it didn't work out for him. And like I said, much of the New Testament speaks about Balaam and his love for money. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 14, Greg spoke about this some months back. He says to the church there, "But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication." So, when Israel was united under the laws of God, being obedient to God, we know that all the blessings of God would come upon them. And so God wouldn't allow Balaam to curse Israel. So Balaam recognizes that if they just stop obeying God, if they get out from underneath that covenant, if they get out from underneath the umbrella of God and walk in disobedience, then the curses of God are promised also to come upon them. And so Balaam cast that stumbling block. He divided them from God, and then he was able to conquer them. And so that's the devil's ploy in many, many areas. Satan could not defeat a unified, obedient people of Israel. Even though they were just natural, mortal people, Satan could not have his way with them as long as they were walking in obedience to God. And we today as well, weak as we are, even you individually, the devil cannot have his way with you if you walk in the right way, if you recognize the ploy of the devil, and if you walk in righteousness and in holiness. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 8, to give some a credit to this idea that the devil actually is a king, he actually has a throne, it speaks about in the book of Revelation. Satan's seat was in a certain place. He's not like God in that he's omnipresent. Satan has an actual spot wherein he sits. And then he has devils that he sends to and fro throughout the world, and they bring him information. It's an actual kingdom that really is functioning like a kingdom would. And when he wants to destroy a people or do some awful thing, he has to come up with a plan. And he's always scheming, always trying to come up with some way to destroy us. He has many designs and devices by which he wants to take advantage of us. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 8, Jesus was being tempted of the devil. Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. So Jesus came down from heaven to gather the world to himself. He wanted to win the kingdoms of the world to himself. Satan knew that. Satan comes to Jesus, shows him from the top of a mountain all the kingdoms of the world. I picture Jesus and Satan looking down the channels of time and seeing even the modern era, seeing all the kingdoms of the world and all that Jesus wanted for his possession. And the devil says, "You know it's mine. I can give it to you. All you got to do is bow down before me and worship me, and I'll make you ruler of all these kingdoms if that's what you want." That is what Jesus wanted. Jesus did want the kingdoms of this world, and they did rightfully at that point in their rebellion belong to the devil. And even to this day, the Bible, even in the New Testament, it calls the devil the god of this world, the prince of the power of the air. He rules among the children of men. "I will give you the kingdoms of the world and all the glory of them. And he saith unto him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me." Now some would say, well, he was just trying to deceive Jesus. He didn't really have the power to give those kingdoms. Do you really think Satan, after 4,000 plus years of thinking of ways to deceive people, that he would come to the Son of God and say something to him that actually wasn't even close to true? No, he came very, very close to the truth. He said, look, the kingdoms of the world are mine. I have control over them. I have dominion over them. Adam gave me dominion over the kingdoms of this world. Originally, God gave Adam the dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, right? Satan took that kingdom from Adam. He capitulated, gave the crown to Lucifer, to Satan. And now Satan says to Jesus, look, I've got the kingdoms. You want them? I'll give them to you. Just bow down and worship me. And so he was looking to divide Jesus from the Father so that he could conquer Jesus. Obviously, it didn't work in that instance. In Luke chapter 11, verse 15 through 18, Jesus says something that actually most Americans attribute to Abraham Lincoln for some reason. They often quote this and write Abraham Lincoln underneath. A house divided itself against itself cannot stand. Abraham Lincoln. He was just quoting Jesus. But Luke chapter 11, verse 15 through 18. But some of them said, Jesus had just cast out a devil of someone. Some of them said, he casteth out devils through Beelzebub, the chief of the devils. And others, tempting him, sought of him a sign from heaven. But he, knowing their thoughts, said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth. If Satan also be divided against himself, how shall his kingdom stand? Because ye say that I cast out devils through Beelzebub. He was telling us that Satan, I keep doing that, Satan clearly has a kingdom. He has he's putting up an attempt to overtake the kingdoms of this world and even to overtake God's kingdom. And he says, if I'm here on earth casting out devils out of people, you can't chalk that up to the devil, because the devil is working together in unity with one intent to destroy the works of God. So a man casting out the devils clearly could not be working for the devil, because a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And Satan knows that better than anyone. And so rather than casting out devils, what Satan does is he goes into God's kingdom. Anytime there's a house standing together, he looks to divide it and to destroy it. And we can start with the individual. You, the devil wants to divide and destroy. And then we can move to the family, the marriage, the children, the husband-wife relationship, and the father and mother and child relationship, and the church, and the society that we live in, and so on and so forth. It goes into every area of community and interaction and relationships. The devil is looking to divide and destroy. Now let's go back to 2 Corinthians, that passage where we got the devil's devices, Satan's devices from. And we'll start in verse 6. You have to kind of know the backstory, I guess. In 1 Corinthians 5, there was a man who was committing a terrible sin, a sin that even the Gentiles didn't have a name for because it was so disgusting. A man that had his father's wife. And Paul says we should never have that in the church. It just shouldn't happen. This man, we should deliver him over to Satan for the destruction of his flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord Jesus. We don't want him continuing on living like this. He's going to divide the church. He's going to destroy us. We can't have him in our midst. So they actually handed him over to Satan. And Satan must have done something to him. And before he was destroyed, I believe he repented. And he was very sorrowful for what he had done. And this passage speaks about that. And he says to the church now, in his second letter to the Corinthians, sufficient to such a man is this punishment which was inflicted of many. The church actually totally shunned him for a period of time. They divided from him and said, we cannot have anything to do with you as long as you are defaming the name of Christ in that way. So they separated from him and they inflicted it, the whole church inflicted this punishment on this man. So that contrariwise, he says, ye ought rather to forgive him and comfort him, lest perhaps such a one should be swallowed up with overmuch sorrow. So he said, the lesson's been learned. He's repented, he's completely broken, he's overly sorrowful to the point where it might destroy his life altogether. And now here's an opportunity to comfort him, and also it says to confirm your love to him. Verse 8, wherefore I beseech you that you would confirm your love toward him. The idea of punishment in the church, the idea of church discipline is not to say we don't want sin in our midst and you get out of here, we want nothing to do with you. The idea of it is to make this person to turn away from their sin so that we can confirm our love to that person again. We want that person in our midst. We want them here with us. We don't want them out there left to Satan's devices. We want them with us. And so we turn him over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, and then if he's repentant, we quickly confirm our love to him and protect him and comfort him and keep him from Satan's devices. For to this end also did I write, that I might know the proof of you, whether ye be obedient in all things. To whom ye forgive anything, I forgive also. If I forgave anything, to whom I forgave it, for your sakes forgave I it in the person of Christ. So I don't think Paul is saying somehow that he has power to unforgive someone's sins. But in this sense, where the punishment of the devil, the destruction of this man's flesh was hanging over this man. And then when he was repentant, that still kind of kept hanging over him because the church was still disciplining him. And so Paul says, I've forgiven him. In the person of Christ, I've lifted that punishment from him. And I want you to do the same thing. Lift the punishment. Go back to him, comfort him. Let's forgive him of this thing. And let's receive him back into our midst, lest Satan should get an advantage of us. For we are not ignorant of his devices. That's exactly what Satan would do. The church did the exact right thing. They separated from this sinning Christian. They said, we can't have you in our midst. And so Satan says, here's an opportunity. I'm going to jump in there and make this thing worse than it could have been. I'm going to take advantage of this situation. And I'm going to separate these Christians from each other for good. I'm going to make this disciplined Christian so bitter towards Christians that he'll never come back around. Or I'm going to make the church so proud that they're better than this guy is that they'll think we're never going to accept that guy again. Satan jumps on that opportunity. But they did the right thing. But now Paul says we don't want Satan to get advantage of us because we know his devices. We know how sneaky he is. We know he'll take every opportunity to divide a brother from a brother. Every opportunity to put something in between two sisters, or to drive somebody away from a church because they just feel like they're being attacked. And that's exactly what Satan will do. So think about it. When there's a division coming into your life, know for sure that the devil is ploying and he's working against you. He's scheming and planning on how he can destroy whatever relationship, whatever situation you're in. He has a plan, and he's enacting it. And you don't see it many times. You just think, no, I was in the right. That's the devil's plan right there. I was in the right is the devil's idea. Just don't ever give in. You're fine. You didn't do the wrong, even if you didn't. Forgive lest Satan get an advantage of us. So, on an individual level, Satan can divide your vision. He can take your perspective and just kind of twist it a little bit or separate it. There's a passage in the book of Matthew, which I don't think I understand fully, but there's something in it that I do understand. Matthew chapter 6, verse 22 through 24. The light of the body is the eye. And he's talking about physically, your eyes are what brings light and understanding into your body. That's clear. And then he says, then I think he changes them, it almost makes it metaphorical, where it's a spiritual thing. If therefore thine eye be single, he's not saying you only have one eye, he's saying your eye is singularly focused on something. You're looking there, nowhere else. My children are learning to shoot arrows or to shoot rocks with their slingshots. They have to keep their eye on their target. You can't be looking there and over there. It just doesn't work. If your eye is single, the whole body is full of light. But if thine eye be evil, meaning if your eye is kind of shifting over and you're no longer focused on the right thing, then thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? If you're using your eyes to look in the wrong direction, or if your vision is becoming split, then the light that's being let in is actually darkness. And how great is that darkness? And this is the conclusion. No man can serve two masters. He will either hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon is physical substance, money, possessions. You cannot be singularly focused on God and at the same time have your heart set on money, because then you're going to serve one and hate the other. You're going to serve money and you're going to reject God. When the day comes and the difficulties arise, you will choose to serve your stuff rather than God. But if you have your eyes singularly fixed on God, then the stuff that you have is easy enough to say, I'm okay without that. I don't need that. I have my eye fixed. I have the light coming in and it's clear. But the devil will do that. He'll try to fill your life up with stuff so that you get your eye fixed on the stuff And so that way your eye is no longer singular, it is split into two. Or like James puts it, you be double-minded. James chapter 1, verse 5 through 8. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. He's starting to talk about this double-mindedness. Nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. That waving, the waves crashing around you that's making you second-guess your decisions, making you wonder whether or not you're doing the right thing or walking in truth, that's the devil. That's his ploy. That's his deal. That's what he does. He tries to get you to be a double-minded man. For let that not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. If your vision is not singular, if you're not fixed on one thing, then the devil will be able to take advantage of you personally. So in your life, if you have your eye fixed on the wrong things, on stuff and on possessions and on career or whatever it might be, we have to do all those things. We have to have all those things. That's fine. But if your vision gets fixed on those things, that's where the devil will take advantage of you. On a singular level, on an individual level, he will take advantage of you personally, and he'll be able to conquer you. If your mind is divided, you ever notice that sometimes when you're really angry or frustrated at someone, that you're much more susceptible to lust? All of a sudden you give in to pornography, or you're looking at something you shouldn't be looking at because you're frustrated with somebody. Your eye became divided. Your vision became double, and all of a sudden the devil's like, here's an opportunity. Divide and conquer. His mind is no longer fixed. His eye is not singular. He's not focused. He's not fixed on the truth of God. Here's the opportunity to destroy the individual. If he can conquer your mind and take advantage of your mind and split your perspectives and split your heart and focus, then he can conquer all your passions. And he might not do them all at once. You might have full control of some and at the same time be completely lost to others. Some people look like they have really good discipline. They'll get into working out perhaps. I heard this illustration once many years ago. And it looks like, man, that's a very disciplined man. He eats just this much food, never any more. He works out every day. He looks like he's in really good shape. He must be really, really disciplined. Meanwhile, he's fully giving himself over to pornography behind the scenes. He's got no discipline whatsoever. All he has done is controlled one area and given up another area. So the devil will do that. He'll get your eye fixed on something and then take control of your life in another area. And we ought not to be ignorant of that device against you personally, individually. And then we can jump into relationships. And the closest relationship would be the one that we all prize so much, is marriage. The devil will want to divide you from your wife in many, many ways. And I'm sure I won't touch on all the ways in which he could divide you from your wife, but there are several. One more verse before I move to marriage is in Ephesians chapter 4. Verse 7, he says, neither give place to the devil. And that's taken slightly out of context, but he's talking about stealing no more. Him that stole, steal no more. And give no place to the devil. Because the devil has no right over you. You've been purchased by God through the blood of the Lord Jesus. He has purchased you to himself. And now any place that the devil has in your life is what you've given him. It's ground that you've given him to walk on. And he does that through dividing you and then conquering you. So you have the opportunity and the right to see the devil's devices, reject the division, and then walk in truth and give no place to the devil. So dividing marriage, I want to look at 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Can you see the devil in that? It doesn't say anything about the devil there. But if the devil can get a husband to not dwell with his wife according to knowledge, then his prayers are hindered, and the grace of life that belongs to happily married couples goes away. Life becomes miserable. He's got advantage of you over your children, and he will enter in. There's a passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 where it talks about a husband and a wife. If one of them is a believer, one's not, he says, stay together, because if you don't, then the children will be unclean, or they will have the door opened from the devil to be able to walk right into your children's lives. And so the same way here, if you're not dwelling together in unity as a husband and a wife, if the husband is not dwelling with his wife according to knowledge, then his prayers won't be listened to. And he won't be dwelling in the grace of life. And you can always see a man who's miserable in his marriage. He might be happy in many other ways. He might be good at preaching the gospel, but there's just something missing. There's something miserable about his existence. Even if he's rejoicing in the Lord, something is still missing, and that's called the grace of life that's lacking. You know, many couples spend almost no time together. Like, they'll be in the same room for several hours a day, but they spend almost no time together. So I'm not saying every division is the devil, don't get me wrong here, but think about this. Most men work 60 plus hours a week, and then they sleep for 8 hours. And then they drive to work, which takes half hour or more a day. So how many hours a day are left to the family? And then many husbands, when they get home from work, they got to go out to the shop. They got to be in the shop. They got to work on the next project, this thing, that thing, the other thing. And then, or some guys will be off with the guys, hanging out with the boys, or playing some kind of video game, for, whatever it might be, just constantly distracted, staying away. Now, those things in and of themselves probably all have their place and can all be good in the right time. But you can see how the devil would use those things to create a divide in a marriage. Be wary of his devices. Like I said before, what the church in Corinth did with that sinning Christian was a good thing, and the devil took advantage of it. And so you can do a lot of good things in your life that the devil will say, here's an opportunity. I'll jump on this good thing. I'll blow it up. Many, many Christian ministers have had this happen, where they get so excited about preaching and teaching and counseling and doing all kinds of stuff, and before you know it, their kids hate God and hate the church, and their marriage falls apart, and many terrible things happen. What happened? Well, the guy was just doing good things, but the devil took advantage of it. He divided the household, and he totally destroyed. He divided and conquered. Or many men get home from work, and all she wants to do is watch TV or play on her phone or fiddling with something, reading romance novels, living in some other world maybe. And they're never really together. It goes both ways, but he'll take advantage of many different opportunities. Even when you're in the same space together, you're completely divided. Or you'll be completely focused on the children. There's never any connection between you and your wife or you and your husband. It's just children, 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 and that's it. God or the devil will take advantage of that and divide your marriage. And if he can divide the marriage, he can destroy the children. That's the bedrock of the family. That's the foundation. If you want happy, healthy, obedient children, love their mom like crazy. Submit to their dad like as if he's your Lord. Honor him to the moon. Think of him as something awesome. Be in awe of their dad. How many people know an old couple that literally just bickers about everything? Like, it doesn't matter what the husband says, the wife will be ready to say something the opposite. And even if she agrees, she's just got to say something contrary to what he said. And the opposite way happens too, right? Anytime she says something, oh, no, that's not how it was. Just little things. And they're just all the day long, they just bicker, bicker, bicker. The devil doesn't care if they're not committing adultery on each other. The devil doesn't care if they're not, looking at pornography then. If he can just get them to bicker, 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 and fight, then he's got that house divided. If they're not willing to sit down and communicate and to talk about things and to actually go over stuff, then he's going to have that household, that marriage divided very quickly. It is Satan's ploy to divide and then make those differences feel like they're irreconcilable. I know that's how I feel often. I'm a bit emotional that way. When there's a bit of a divide, I feel like, I don't know how this can ever get over. I don't know how we can ever get over this. This is way too big. There's no way we're going to get past this. We might as well just, what are we going to do? It's not going to happen. And that's how the devil will come in. He'll be like, you'll never be able to forgive this. You'll never be able to let it go. You'll never be able to sit down with this person again. It's over. Don't even bother. When God's way is, go have the hard conversation. Go talk it over. Iron sharpens iron, we're going to read soon, and it works. You have to just spend time together. The more time you spend together, guess what? For the first many years, perhaps, it might get hard. It might get harder than you ever thought. And then it becomes sweet. Then it starts to blossom. There's a long period of waiting sometimes. You go to that tomato plant over and over and over again looking for fruit, and it just doesn't seem to be there. And then one day it's ripening, and before you know it, it's beautiful, and you get to eat the sweet fruit of it. Marriage is like that. Church is like that. Every relationship is like that. So when I say don't let Satan divide you, I'm not saying don't ever have a discussion on things you disagree with. In fact, just the opposite. The devil would like to come in and say, you disagree with Neil, just don't even talk to him about it. Don't ever bring it up. Oh, I don't want to get into that. I'm not talking church, I'm not talking politics, I'm not talking God. We don't want to go there because that just brings up fights. Well, then you'll also never be close. You'll never have a good relationship. And this goes right into marriage. Wives, study what your husband likes. Maybe read a book on some of his hobbies once. Learn what makes him tick and makes him excited, and then have an actual conversation with him about it. You might shock him. And he might actually want to spend a lot of time with you because suddenly he has a companion who actually is interested in what he's interested in. Instead of just blaming or accusing or criticizing for not doing enough, not being around enough, not being in control, not being a good leader, whatever it might be. Maybe try just talking to him about what he really likes to talk about. Do you know anything about what he likes? Would you be able to talk theology with your husband? Would you be able to talk a little bit about his hobby? I know you're not going to learn all the technicalities about computers or cars or trucks or whatever it might be, or guns. I don't know what your husband is into. But could you take his interests and his passions seriously enough to be actually interested? This is a problem. If you can't be interested in what he's interested in, he's going to be elsewhere. Obviously, I'm not speaking to men right now. You have no excuse, men. I would say, men, talk to your wives about everything. Again, obviously, if the wife just rejects it, never wants to hear it, then it's going to be very difficult to do. But think about what you can talk to her about. Plan conversations if you have to. Bring up things and then educate her on what you're interested in so that she can be interested in it, perhaps. If not, Satan will take advantage of you. If you're not interested at all in what he's interested in, the house is being divided. And that seems like a small thing. Well, I'm just not into sports. That's fine. My wife knows I love sports, and she doesn't know any of the players that I like. Whatever. That's fine. But she knows enough to where she's actually excited when something happens that I'm excited about. And we have conversations about pretty much everything. We don't always agree. We sometimes get into squabbles over it or whatever it might be, but those things are bringing us closer together. And there's obviously, again, there's certain people that I can get together with and talk theology more than I can with her because our minds kind of tick the same way over certain topics. But she knows more or less what I believe. You start talking to her about my theology and she'll be able to say what I say because she's listening and she's careful and we have conversations about these things. We talk about politics together. We talk about natural health together. We talk about food and how to grow it, and we're out in the garden together. Is our relationship perfect? Absolutely nowhere close. I've heard some of you guys talk about your relationships, and I think, man, that sounds like you guys just get along perfectly. Like, no squabbles, no fights. It just, we often have our heads butting together where we're frustrated with each other over things. But one thing we don't do is we don't let that divide us for too long. Sometimes maybe a little too long. But usually we come back and we talk it over, we discuss it, and then what happens? We become closer because of it. If all I did was every time I was frustrated with her, just constantly outside spending time in the shop and never came back in until it was too late to really have a conversation and we're both exhausted, that would split the marriage pretty quick. And then you're not dwelling with her according to knowledge. You're not learning what makes her tick. You know, you are in the school, the university of your wife. It's up to you to learn what makes her really excited and what's plaguing her. What makes her uncomfortable in a crowd? What makes her afraid to approach people? What makes her anxious and uptight? Or what makes her really just open up and blossom? Learn those things and then discuss things that makes her excited. Maybe read a book that she likes, things that she likes to talk about. I read a book a while back on midwifery. It's a little awkward. It was really interesting. There was a lot of good things that we've talked about, and we found a lot of common ground on it. Get on the same page and stay on the same page throughout your marriage. Communicate. Speak about the things that are bothering you. Don't just say, well, I'm not going there again. That was hurt. That was too painful. It has to be painful. Like I mentioned before, working out. I like to work out. But this week my legs are sore. I was doing squats and it hurts. But that's how you get stronger. Now I can lift more than I did before. And my back is stronger for it. My legs are stronger for it. That's how you get there. And the relationship is exactly the same way. There's going to be aches. There's going to be pains. There's going to be times when it just feels like this isn't worth it. This hurts too much. Don't let Satan rip you apart, divide you by saying it's not worth it. Just leave that topic alone. Don't ever discuss it again. If he can divide the marriage, he will divide the family. So divide the parents, and you've already divided the family. And then add on top of that a lot of different things. And I'm just going to list off a few things that do happen sometimes, and I'm not trying to pick on any one thing, because not every one of these things is somehow wrong in and of itself. But think back 150 years ago, the average house size, physical house size, was probably under 1,000 square feet. Average. There was big houses, obviously. But most families lived with 5, 10, 15 kids in a small house. And they constantly rubbed each other. Always interacting, always with each other. Fathers worked from home. They worked their fields. They had their boys right next to them, like you see when you drive through the Amish community. A little 2-year-old tagging along behind dad as he goes out to the field to do something. The little girls in the garden weeding with mom. They were always together back in the day, and they lived in small, confined spaces. Now what do we have? Massive houses, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 square feet. Every child has their own room. Everyone has their own bathroom even. I draw houses all the time. It's amazing what people design. They can't ever even draw a limit. It's just, they want bigger, fancier, better. And it just, all of it is an opportunity. I'm not saying everything is of the devil. It's not like the devil designed big houses. But he will give those things opportunity, or he'll take opportunity from those things to divide the family. So that now, it used to be everybody gathered in the living room around the fire, played games, read books. Now, everybody's got their own device, everybody's got their own tablet, everybody's got their own screen, they all got their own room, they all just go on, do their own thing, and they spend no time together. He's already got you divided. His ploy is already working. You're all in separate corners of the house, always divided from one another, and then he can enter in, and he can wreak havoc on that household. Vodi Bakum, he's a strong advocate for homeschooling, and I know not everybody homeschools, so I'm not saying have to homeschool. So I feel like I have to clarify that, because a lot of us do, and we don't want people to think that we are a homeschooled church. We're a church that wants to raise our families well and raise our children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But Vodi Bakum says about public school in particular, because the public school system is completely secular. He says, if you keep sending your children to Caesar to be trained, don't be surprised if they come home acting like Romans. So if the devil will use the opportunity of you being divided from your children all the day long, teaching them things that you would never teach them, and then sending them back into your house, he's already divided the home. Extracurricular activities. One kid's got to go here, one kid's got to go there. We got to have this thing going, we got to have that thing going on. We got 2, 3 cars because one kid's got to go this way, one's got to go that way, where everybody's going different ways. Those are all ways that the devil uses to divide households. And then on top of that, some of you have probably started to realize that the devil really loves the idea of the generational gap, where your kids think you're not cool. They think you're old-fashioned or plain or boring. And he especially did this with families that came from Mexico. because the parents speak with a German accent, and the kids went to school and were told that Mennonites were not cool and that it's kind of old-fashioned to live a certain way, and then they come home and they see the parents living that exact way, and they're kind of embarrassed of it. And then this great generational gap develops. You know, that gap is completely null and void if you spend copious amounts of time together. My kids don't think I'm old-fashioned. Maybe it's because I'm actually cool, but I'm trying to trick myself there. They actually think that they would like to be like me, or they would like to have a marriage like ours, or they really think that we have something exciting and special, because we do, and we're always together. We spend time all the time. Even if it's not special time, we're just in the same vicinity, and they see us interacting, they see us working together. And I don't know what the end result will be of it all. We might have more issues than I fear. I don't know what's all going to happen. But right now, we're doing our best to not be divided in every way we can. Obviously, I'm not saying don't ever go to work, but be as united and together as you possibly can. Have conversations with your kids about the things that they're learning, about the things that they're going through, about the different people in their lives. We talk about people all the time. I hope it doesn't come into gossip. I don't think it's gossip typically when we speak about people, but we're studying others. We're looking at what they do and what the reaction was and what the result was, and we're interacting with our kids on this plane, trying to discuss what's the right way of going about things. Maybe sometimes we're criticizing. I hope that's not the case. We try to stay away from criticizing others, but rather just talk about it to learn. And we're discussing with our kids the result and the effects of different decisions. And in Deuteronomy chapter 6, God speaks to the children of Israel. He says this, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might." Do you do that? Love him with all your heart, soul, might. "And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. Have them in your heart. Love God with your whole heart." And then he says, "And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children." On Sunday morning. I hope you caught the mistake there. "Teach them diligently unto thy children, and thou shalt talk of them when? When thou sittest down in thy house, and when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." What does that encompass? I mean, that's when you sit down to have a meal, you talk. You talk about the things of life and how life should be lived, and about the things of God and how you love God. And when you're walking by the way, when you're going to get something, when you're going to work, when you're working together, when you're doing things, and when you lie down at night, discuss a little bit more with them. Tell them a story, perhaps. Share with them the good news of God, and tell them about the ancient nation of Israel and all the things that transpired. And when you wake up in the morning, start it all over again. Talking to them, talking to them, talking to them. So that when they have something to talk about, they won't second guess coming to talk to you. Because you've always been talking to them. You didn't hide things from them. You talked to them. The devil will look to divide you from your parents. The devil will look to divide you from your kids. And in some cases, perhaps he already has worked his way in. But I want you to recognize it as the devil. Both of you. Recognize it. It has been the devil involved in your life. Satan has taken advantage of you. And you're not willing to forgive. You're not willing to let go. Don't let Satan divide your family. And then he likes to divide the church. It's all kind of the same, so I won't spend too much time, but the same idea. He'll use petty little issues to divide a brother from a brother. And it's easier with the church, in a sense, because we're not sworn to live together in the same house. We haven't promised to love each other till death do us part. If you just bother me too much, I can just go off somewhere else, and we'll just go our separate ways, and all is well. But he'll take petty little issues like your personal preference versus his personal preference, your taste in music versus her taste in music, and then just we can't see eye to eye, we can't go together anymore, we can't be in the same room, we just can't, it just doesn't work. He will use preachers, he will use teachers, he will use anything to divide the leadership of a church. Bring in petty little issues, doctrinal debates, or whatever it might be, just to try to divide. It's always his ploy, like this tape down the middle here. Let you guys over there, let's separate you all. You see where I'm going with that? The devil is very active in our society right now. I'm not saying everything is bad. The devil is just going to use it as an opportunity. Iron sharpeneth iron, sharpeneth iron. Proverbs 24:17. So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. If you are never in a disagreement with somebody and then get over it, then you're not being sharpened. If you have issues with someone and you work it out and you get over it, you have the hard conversations that just feel really uncomfortable to have, and then you work past it, then you're sharper for it. But if not, you're going to get dull in every relationship. In Galatians chapter 5, for brethren, ye have been called unto liberty, verse 13. Only use not a liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. But if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another. There's a tornado alert, just so you guys are all aware. That's something to watch for sure. Now, don't let Satan take advantage of your divided attention. It's not too much longer. If you bite and devour one another, if you keep taking bites of somebody, be careful that you don't all of a sudden consume them, or they consume you. You won't be much left of us if we keep biting and devouring one another. This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. You know, Satan cannot stand against our unity. If we have a united vision and purpose, the devil has no chance on us. Not only can he not come in and attack us, but we can go in and attack him, and he will not be able to stand. The Bible says that the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church if the church is standing on the truth of the gospel, the truth of who Jesus is. How does Satan then get advantage of us as a church? He will bring division through unforgiveness, as mentioned in the passage above, the 2 Corinthians, or through false doctrine, as it was in Galatia, in this letter to the Galatians. If the church, though, stands together in truth, his hands, the devil's hands, are tied. He stands outside the church looking for opportunity. Picture him this way. I know he's not physical like us. He's a spirit being. But he's outside our congregation, not just here Sunday mornings. He's outside our church and outside your home. He's got his minions, his devils everywhere, watching for opportunity to come in, looking for that divide so that he can go in and make the divide greater and then conquer. You personally, your family, your marriage, your church, and your society. The Bible actually calls the church in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15, the pillar and ground of the truth. We keep our strength through a united vision. In Matthew chapter 16, I'll read that passage, 16 through 18. Simon Peter answered and said, he asked the disciples, who do you say that I am? Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock, the rock of thou art the Christ. That's the rock we build our church on. The Son of the living God. On this rock will I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The gates of hell are a defense. Hell has defenses that you and I, as a church, a united church captured around the vision of Jesus being the Christ, we can go towards the gates of hell, and they won't be able to stop us. We'll be able to go in and save souls and help people and make a difference. Another passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. I'm jealous over you with a godly jealousy. For I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. But I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. Like John talked about earlier today in the book of Mark, forgive because you have been forgiven. But if you fail to recognize the simplicity of the gospel, the simplicity that is in Christ, then you will complicate forgiveness in your relationships, and Satan will have his way with your relationships. So don't be beguiled by the devil. Don't be tricked by him. Adam and Eve standing together were too much for Satan. Where two or three are gathered, Jesus is in the midst and the devil has no power. But when the devil was able to divide Adam and Eve and speak directly to Eve, then he was able to deceive them both and destroy the whole plan. He separated them from God's truth, and he conquered the kingdom of this world. And now I just want to briefly talk about, I hope it's briefly, yes, I'll make it briefly. Our society is the exact same thing is happening. And I'm no expert on the idea of Marxism, but I've been learning about it a fair bit in the last few weeks. There has been a ploy. It's not a conspiracy. There's been an actual attempt by the Marxists of this world to take over the Western world. Now, the Western world, Canada, US, even England, was established on basic Bible principles. I'm not saying that the Western world has always been godly. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of sin, a lot of evil happening in the Western world. We've done some of the most horrific things you can imagine all over the world, and there's no excuse for it. But the basic comforts that we share come from the idea that we value every human life, even the unborn. Every person is made in the image of God. And today, you're being divided. If you believe that, you're old-fashioned and you don't love women. You don't think women are as cared for or as good as men, because they should have a choice. It's their own body. And also individual rights, that everybody should be allowed to do what they want. Or even things like private property. All those things are being taken from us. And they're being made, it's a divisive thing that's being brought into our society. If you look at America, you can see it better than anywhere. The country is pretty much literally split 50-50. And I would be amazed if there is much of a country left after this year and the coming years are over. Like it is being divided. It's been being divided for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years perhaps, especially. I mean, the devil is always looking for opportunity, but there was an actual agenda brought in to split up the West through this whole idea of Marxism, which I can't get into too much here today. So he knows the power of unity. Even people like our society, we wouldn't say that our society is largely Christian, or that even the history of US and Canada, that it's a history of Christianity. It's not. That's a mistake to think that. It's a society that was unified under one common goal, and that goal was to support they call it the nuclear family, which is the husband takes care of the family, he provides, the wife is subject and honoring, and the children obey the parents. That's the nuclear family. And if you read on, just for instance, the Black Lives Matter page, go on their website. If you learn anything about Black Lives Matter, it's a huge uprising right now in America, but it's part of Marxism. They were trying to destroy America and Canada and the whole way that we've done society over the last 300 or 400 years. What they're trying to do is not support black lives. We all want black lives cared for. We all want them treated better than they've been treated. But if you go right on their website, under their mission statement, they'll tell you that the nuclear family is something that they're against. That they don't like the idea of women being wives and mothers. They want women to be feminist, independent, and completely separate. They want everybody to be able to choose their own gender. And you can do whatever you want with your sexuality. You don't have to be governed by anything. And on and on and on it goes. They're trying to divide America and Canada and even our communities here. And I think the time is coming, as a forewarning, that you're going to have to stand up for what you believe. They might not come to you and say, deny Jesus or you're going to be dead. Sometimes we all think that, well, if that happened, I would say, no way, I'm going to heaven. Go ahead and kill me. But rather they'll come in and say, be okay with homosexuality. Be okay with transgenderism. Let people be okay with all these things and don't speak against it. Just be quiet. Don't ever say anything against it. And they're going to come in and divide and divide and divide. And churches are being divided over this issue right now. Large amounts of conservative Christian churches are being divided over these exact issues because everybody feels like, well, yeah, of course I want to support black lives. And then the devil will take that opportunity and say, okay, here's the chance. Now let's get people compromising on this, compromising on that. Let's split the whole, fragment everything. More and more, society will be asking us to give up our ideals and our convictions in regards to these things. You will be seen as a bigot, old-fashioned, or even evil. They're going so far with this Marxism idea that they're actually shutting down scientists if the scientists prove something that says that life begins at conception, or if it says something about homosexuality being very damaging to a society. If science proves that, they'll shut that scientist down, and they'll delete them off of YouTube. There's a channel that I listened to for a long time. He had over 1 million subscribers. He was totally deleted off of the page completely. Just like in Nazi Germany, when they would take Christian books and other literature and burn them in piles, they're doing the same thing online. They're shutting down complete websites, taking them off completely. The devil is using this to split and fragment our society. But the wonderful good news for us as Christians, and I have fallen into this trap sometimes thinking that we should just have a society that just keeps getting better and better and better. More and more life, more and more godliness, and then eventually we'll take over the whole world and everything will be good. Now, the Western world influenced the whole world for good, I'm sure of it. But our hope is ultimately not in this world. In the sweet by and by is where we place our hope. Our hope is reserved for us in heaven, and that's where we rest. That's where we hope. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20 speaks to this day and age. It says, "Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." That's what our society is doing. They're going to dress us up. People who love family, people who love God and natural created order, people who love babies and the beauty of family the way it was created to be, are going to be seen as the evil, bigoted, old-fashioned, racist, homophobic people in our society. And now you're going to have an opportunity to stand against it or allow Satan to get advantage of you and to split you up. Households are being split over this topic. The society is being split over this topic. One last little bit of good news, Colossians chapter 2, verse 13 through 15. "And you, being dead in your sins and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, hath he quickened together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. And having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it." So when you find yourself being divided in your personal life, or you find your marriage being divided, or you find your family being divided, or your church relationships being divided, or our society being fragmented and divided, know this, that the devil tried to do the same thing with Jesus. He went to Jesus in the garden and tempted him to reject the idea of the cross, so much so that Jesus said, "Father, let this cup pass from me. It's too much." Satan was trying to divide Jesus from God. Jesus went ahead and did exactly what he was supposed to do. He took the crucifixion, he was raised from the dead, and then he made a triumphant entry back into this world. He triumphed over the enemy, over the principalities and powers, over the devil. He has no right in our lives, and we have a place reserved for us in heaven. And once this battle is over, we have eternity to look forward to. Keep that in your mind. Keep that in perspective. Remember that the enemy has been defeated. And he has no place except for what you give him. Don't let him divide. Don't let him work on the natural divisions that happen in your life anyway. Work hard to bring that unity back in. Work hard to pursue the people that you're divided from and go after. If you spend 60 hours plus a week at work, make sure that you spend a lot more hours at home working to build your marriage, working to build your relationships with your kids, because you can't afford to be too tired. You can't afford to let the devil take advantage of you and destroy your families and your marriages. Jesus has pulled the rug out from under the feet of Satan. He's got no foot to stand on. We have been unified with the Father, and he cannot do anything about it. We have been made one with God through the Lord Jesus. And Satan can now accuse us, but he has no right. Our relationship is secure and settled with God the Father. Jesus took the divide and brought it together. He reached one hand up to God the Father as a man,